Hello guys and gals, and welcome to another episode of Unique Items. Today we're going to be taking a look at the boots known as 100,000 Steps. This is a Barbarian only pair of boots, and it can drop as Sacred or Ancestral, so World Tier 3 or World Tier 4. This particular pair of boots has some pretty nice effects on it, and we're going to go over them together and talk about them. So first off is we have attacks reduces evades cooldown on these boots, which is by 0.8 seconds. And these, of course, can be upgraded, so that effect can go up. But basically just means that every time you attack, you have a chance of, well, not a chance, it's a definite possibility. It's 100% actually, that you will reduce the cooldown of your evade by 0.8 seconds every single time you attack a target. You also get the 42 dexterity, which does go from 28 to 42, and that can be upgraded as well when you upgrade the item. 26% damage with skills that swap to new weapons, so this is really kind of set up for the walking arsenal. And it does vary from 14 to 28%. We also have 17.5% damage to stunned enemies, which goes well with the ground stomp. As you can see, it's a +3 ground stomp. And when you upgrade it, it does go up to +4 ground stomp. Now, I've been using ground stomp a lot, and ground stomp has some very interesting effects, and we need to talk about this. So ground stomp, which this is ground stomp, and also ground stomp, which this is ground stomp, and also, you know, just in general, like, this is also ground stomp. Or, of course, I think I actually have to hit monsters for that one to have an effect. But basically, there's multiple ways that you can trigger ground stomp, okay? Ground stomp also has multiple aspects, which can make it better or worse, depending on how you utilize it. For instance, there is the aspect which gives you leap, creates an earthquake, but also, when you have this particular aspect on your character, you also get a 15% damage reduction, so 5 to 15% damage reduction while standing in the earthquake, which is pretty darn cool. Then on top of this, you can also utilize the other effect, which is ground stomp creates an earthquake, which causes physical damage over 4 seconds, blah, 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 but also gives you 5 to 15% increased damage when you're standing in your earthquake. Because you can get 15% increased damage and 15% decreased damage to you for having an earthquake. Which basically means that not only does this give you points to your ground stomp, but it also gives you a free earthquake. Which is also happening kind of nicely. So you get a free ground stomp, which is going to be a free stun with all the monsters around you. You also get a free earthquake, and then on top of that, you also get the 15% damage reduction, and you get the 15% damage increase if you're standing in that particular earthquake. Now, this is the Walking Arsenal passive. So it's after gaining the final damage bonus from the Walking Arsenal key passive, and whenever it says key passive, it's always talking about one of the capstones. And the final bonus is while all 3 damage bonuses are active, you gain an additional 15% increased damage. So when you activate that final bonus, that's when the free ground stomp comes. Now, you can do this in a myriad of ways. You can basically, utilize something like Iron Maelstrom. You can utilize, like, Frenzy, and then use something like Leap, and then use another skill that uses a different. And basically, like, you can set up your skills to use different weapons. If you see down there at the bottom, this one is using the two-handed sword, which is the slicing. And then this is the dual wield, so that's 2 different weapons, and so forth and so on. Now, this can only happen once every 30 seconds, which I think kind of makes it a little less effective than it otherwise would be. Especially considering if I really wanted to, I could reset Leap over and over again and have tons of earthquakes. But the stun from ground stomp is very nice. Also, it reduces the cooldown of your ultimate skill by 1 second for every enemy damaged by ground stomp. So if you are using an ultimate, you can basically utilize this to have constant resets. Now let me show you the Walking Arsenal one, because if I use my my Iron Maelstrom here, you'll see that I get my free ground stomp right there. And then that also causes the earthquake to happen, which while I'm standing in the earthquake, I'm also getting those damage bonuses, the damage reduction, and the damage increase for that particular time period. Which, I mean, all in all, having a free ground stomp going off once every 30 seconds is certainly not terrible. And if you're utilizing the Walking Arsenal key passive already, if it's already part of your build, it just kind of makes sense. Ground stomp is also kind of interesting as well, just as an ability. Now, the only thing I don't like about these boots is that there is another aspect that is really nice called the aspect of perpetual stomping that allows you to reset your leap cooldown by using Ground Stomp or Kick, which is another Ground Stomp ability, right? So basically, having this one instead of these allows you to constantly reset your leap, which is also creating earthquakes, by the way, by kicking or by ground stomping. This allows you to essentially have almost an infinite amount of leaps because you are constantly resetting that cooldown, and you constantly have earthquakes going off all the time. Now, I think the aspect of perpetual stomping, I think, can go on some other items, and maybe you can use them in tandem. But basically, they are kind of like, you know, like kissing cousins, so to speak, because they're both giving you kind of a similar effect. One of them is allowing you to spam as many earthquakes as you can possibly spam, which also gives you more leaps in the process, which leap is certainly not a terrible ability. All in all, not only does it give you the earthquake, it also slows down enemies by 70% now, which is kind of crazy, and it's a great movement ability to get you in and out of combat as needed. Whereas this one seems to be more around the idea of utilizing the walking arsenal. So if you're a barbarian who's utilizing the walking arsenal key passive, and you'd like to have basically a free stun happen on a regular basis. And the other cool thing is that this is going to happen whether you have ground stomp on your bar or not. So if you don't have ground stomp on your bar, which for some reason I can't find it at the moment, if you don't have ground stomp actually put on your bar, the really cool thing is it'll still happen. So you don't need ground stomp on your bar for the free ground stomp to happen, which is really interesting. You basically just get that for free. Now, the other really cool thing about this is that it gives you a huge amount of fury back when you automatically cast the ability. So when you cast ground stomp, you gain 32 to 50 fury. So this basically means that you're constantly getting back about, and let's just pretend you have the maximum. So 50 fury every 30 seconds, as long as you're constantly in combat. Now, 50 fury might not seem like a whole lot, but combine it with all the various things that ground stomp can do. You're gaining 50 fury back, right? It's a free cast of ground stomp, so all the enemies around you are now stunned for 4 seconds, which is very nice, right? On top of that, you're also reducing the cooldown of your ultimate skill by 1 second for each enemy that's caught within the ground stomp. And then just, in general, you're also getting a damage bonus for swapping weapons. You're getting that stun damage bonus as well, so all the enemies around you are stunned, which means you're getting a bigger damage bonus against them. They're also crowd controlled, so if you have damage versus crowd controlled on any of your equipment, you're also going to get that damage bonus as well. And, I mean, it's not terrible. Like, it really isn't. Also, the evade cooldown thing, you can actually just kind of swing at the air. I'm not sure if you guys have actually noticed this, but when you evade, like if you just swing at the air, the evade cooldown thing works. So while the boots might not be the most amazing in terms of charges, like I would personally prefer the +4 charges, but you can notice that you can very easily pull that cooldown like literally to nothing relatively quickly just by attacking the air, which is kind of silly. The flavor text on these says, while many barbarians remained in the Dreadlands, small groups from the Oxen, Crane, and Bear tribes instead chose to search the land for a new home. A history of the children of Bulkathos. They're interesting boots. I think that they fit into a lot of different builds, and it really depends on what build you're doing. Obviously, you have to be using the Walking Arsenal key passive to really get the best effect out of these boots. They do offer the +3, which eventually goes up to +4 ground stomp on them. So if you are utilizing ground stomp as one of your main abilities, it could make sense to utilize this for additional plus to skills. But what does plus to skills actually give ground stomp? So if you take a look at it right now, I have rank 4, which is 11.83 seconds at 1,177, right? And with the +3 on there, it goes up to 1,448 at 10.45 seconds. So not like a huge difference in the cooldown, but it definitely did up the damage a little bit. But the plus to skills on ground stomp doesn't really seem to be like the most amazing thing as far as that particular skill goes. And that's one of the things that I've kind of learned in my time going across the board, is that it's not always the best to pump points into something. Like, a lot of the times, the only thing that you'll really get out of it is a little tiny bit of cooldown reduction or a tiny bit of damage increase, which doesn't even really even equate to all that much in the grand scheme of things. A lot of the times, if it's not your main ability, if it's not the ability that you're using for your main damage output, pumping points into it specifically to up the damage might not even necessarily give you a whole lot. Like, for instance, I don't really use Leap for its damage output, but it certainly doesn't hurt when I leap into a group of monsters that I get an earthquake underneath their feet and all that other stuff. But it would be nice to have damage output from something like that. Unfortunately, I just don't think Ground Stomp really does a massive amount of damage comparatively, even with the bonus skill points. I mean, you're talking about like 300 extra damage on the bottom end, which isn't like ridiculously amazing. I think, honestly, the main bonus of Ground Stomp is utility. It is a stun. It is a cooldown reducer. It creates earthquakes. The earthquakes can potentially help you in terms of damage reduction and as well as damage output. And there are tons of different ways that Ground Stomp can be extremely useful, like resetting your leap cooldown and all that. But as an actual damage ability, it's not like the most amazing. Anyway, as always, I do appreciate you guys and gals watching my videos, even when we're just talking about a pair of sweet Nikes. No, I'm just kidding. 100,000 steps. And as always, keep watching.